and welcome to another Warhammer 40,000 battle report brought to you by the Legion Wargaming. Today, as the forces of the Imperial Guard desperately attempt to hold back the tide of Tyranids that have overrun several of this planet's continental landmasses, the loyal servants of the Emperor are faced with a new crisis. A senior Imperial Navy officer in charge of coordinating the Imperial air power in this conflict has been stranded far from the protection of the Astra Militarum armies on the planet's surface, as his Vendetta transport has suffered a catastrophic engine failure. Even now, a mechanised relief force is en route to recover this vital commander, but the hive mind is also aware of this development and the shadow in the warp approaches. The battle today is 1,500 points. It is Astra Militarum versus Tyranids. It will be Vanguard Strike deployments, and the scenario is the Relic. But today, instead of the Relic being an item, it is the Imperial Navy officer that will be the objective for both armies. Will the Astra Militarum be able to recover him in time, or will he suffer a hideous fate if he is overrun and taken by the Tyranid swarm? Let's take a look at the armies. This 1,500 point Astra Militarum army is battle forged and is a single combined arms detachment. It is led by Commissar Yarrick, himself the hero of Hades' Hive, and as a second HQ choice we have a tank commander. He's in a Lehman Russ Exterminator with heavy bolter sponsons, and he has another tank in his squadron. Exactly the same loadout. He will be using the rules for Knight Commander Pask today. And Yarrick has brought along the elite of the Armageddon Steel Legion, the 301st Mechanised Grenadiers. So we have 3 squads of Imperial Guard veterans. They have the Grenadiers doctrine giving them carapace armour, and each squad has 3 plasma guns. And being the Armageddon Steel Legion, each squad comes mounted in a Chimera transport. But they are not the most elite troops in this force today. We have an elite's choice. It's a platoon of Militarum Tempestus Scions. They are led by a Scion command squad. They have 3 plasma guns. They are mounted in a Chimera, and a squad of 10 Tempestus Scions. They are just relying on their hotshot las guns, and they are also mounted in a Chimera, this one with a hull mounted heavy flamer. This is one of the most elite Astra Militarum armies we have seen. They are the rescue force, but will they reach the Imperial Navy officer before the Tyranids? Let's take a look at what they're up against. This 1,500 point Tyranid army is battle forged and is a single combined arms detachment. As its 2 HQs, it has 2 Tervigons. They will be looking to spawn gaunts to add to the gaunts already starting this battle, which are the 2 troop choices, 2 units, each of 10 gaunts with flesh borers. We have a single elite choice, a Haruspex, and 3 fast attack choices. The first is a brood of 6 Raveners with Rending Claws and Devourers. The second is a Hive Crone, and the third is another brood of 6 Raveners with Rending Claws and Devourers. And to round off this detachment, we have a single heavy support choice in the form of a Trigon Prime. This is the Tyranid swarm that will be scuttling out to consume the Imperial officer. Will they be able to do it? Let's see. Moving into deployment. And the armies have deployed, and it is with some relief that the Imperial Navy officer hears the rumble of engines. He knows he is vital to the Imperium's success on this world. He knows that High Command will send out a relief force to rescue him, and the armoured column has arrived. On the right flank, the Militarum Tempestus platoon, they are planning to plough straight over these rocks to the Commodore's rescue. The squad of 10 Scions is in their Chimera leading the way. They are supported by the Scion Command Squad in their Chimera. Meanwhile, the tank commander and the other Leman Russ, they have taken up good firing positions, hull down in this ruined shrine. And Yarrick, he is leading the Armageddon Steel Legion Mechanised Grenadiers through these woods, past these rocky rises, and he can see the smoke rising from the wrecked Vendetta. He has ordered his men to move as quickly as possible to the Commodore's position as well. But the Commodore's relief is short-lived, as from behind he hears a bestial roar, and as he turns he is horrified to see monstrous shapes emerging from this abandoned base. The Tyranid swarm has arrived. On their far right flank they have a brood of raveners slithering through these rocks, and their centre is held by one of their HQ Tervigons, all of the Gaunts, and another Tervigon. These two may well be spawning a lot more reinforcements for the Tyranids. The Haruspex has smashed its way through this complex and is moving past these barricades as quickly as possible, and on the Tyranids' far left flank another brood of raveners has come slithering forward. The Tyranids also have sent out their psychic call. A Trigon Prime is tunnelling towards this battlefield, and a Hive Crone is swooping as quickly as it can. So this is a race against time. Who will reach the Imperial officer first? The armoured relief column led by Yarrick, or the monstrous Tyranid swarm? The Astra Militarum deployed first, so unless the Tyranids can seize the initiative, we go into Astra Militarum, turn 1. And with the Tyranids failing to seize the initiative, the Astra Militarum rescue column has moved quickly. On their right flank, the Scion command squad, they have motored forward a full 12 inches, negotiating their way through this dangerous terrain. Meanwhile, the squad of 10 Tempestus Scions, they have moved 6 inches up this rocky rise in their Chimera, and they have deployed. They are already very close to rescuing the Commodore, but the Tyranids are extremely close as well. So the Astra Militarum, they have a plan. The Leman Russes have held position. They are going to give fire to try to knock out the Tervigon in the centre, to stop it moving up and spawning its Termagaunts all over the Commodore. And Yarrick has led the entire Steel Legion platoon as quickly as possible towards the far left flank. They're going to give fire to try to take out the Raveners. They know that these Tyranid creatures are very fast, and they will easily reach the Commodore, even if the Scions run down the rise to his rescue. So a positive start from the Guardsmen. They have no psychers, so there is no psychic phase. We go into Astra Militarum shooting phase, turn 1. End of Astra Militarum shooting phase, turn 1, and the Tempestus Scions, they have run past the down Vendetta. They have made contact with the Imperial Navy Commodore, but they are very, very vulnerable to the Tyranids. They're very close, and the Imperial Guard supporting fire has done very little to thin out the Tyranid line. Yarrick's whole platoon opened fire on the Raveners slithering through these rocks, but a combination of firing snapshots and the cover saves meant that only one Ravener was wounded, but he was finished off as the Tempestus Scion command squad added the fire of their Chimera. But that is only one Ravener. There are 5 more between these rocky outcrops, and the Leman Russ tanks unleashed an absolute hail of fire at the central Tervigon. They got plenty of wounds, but he made a lot of saves. He has still been wounded 3 times, but he is very much alive and in a good position to take on the Scions. They are looking very vulnerable. They have been brave, but will it pay off? With no assaults, we go into Tyranids, turn 1. End of Tyranids movement phase, turn 1, and it does indeed look like the Tempestus Scions have put themselves in a very difficult position. On the Tyranid right flank, the Raveners have come shooting out of the rocks. They are very fast and very close now. This Tervigon that was wounded has lumbered up on top of this rocky outcrop and has unleashed 10 more Gaunts. but good news for the Guard, he has now run out, he won't be spawning anymore. In the centre, the wave of Gaunts is advancing, and this Tervigon has moved up out of the abandoned base and has unleashed another brood of 10. But like the Tervigon on the rocky rise, it's good news for the Guard, he has also run out. But there are still a lot of Gaunts advancing towards these barricades, and on their left the Haruspex has moved forward 5 inches through cover, and on the Tyranid extreme left, the Raveners on this side of the battlefield, they have moved forward 12 as well. The Tyranids, they have swarmed forward as a wave, and it looks very much like the Commodore and the Scions that have tried to rescue him are going to be overrun. Let's see. First we have Tyranid Psychic Phase, turn 1. End of Tyranid Psychic Phase, turn 1, and it has been a successful phase for the Tyranids with 6 dice. This Tervigon, in a surprising move, used 4 of them to put Onslaught onto these Raveners. The Guard failed to deny it, and then with 2 remaining dice, each Tervigon used 1 each to both successfully put Dominion on themselves. So, a good phase for the Tyranids. Let's see what they do in Tyranid Shooting Phase, turn 1. End of Tyranid Shooting Phase, turn 1, and under the effect of Onslaught, these Raveners slithered up another 4 inches and opened fire with their Devourers on the side armour of the Scion Command Squad's Chimera. But although they got 12 hits, they only managed a single successful glance. The Haruspex is moving up, and in its wake is one of the original squads of Gaunts. They both moved up 5 inches. In the centre, the 2 newly spawned squads of Gaunts both open fire on the Scions, each taking out 2 of the elite guardsmen. It is looking pretty grim for the Scions, as these Raveners, they have not fired. They are just looking to tear them apart in assault and to capture the Imperial Navy officer. The Tervigon, on top of the rocks, he added the fire of his Stinger Salvo, but it had no effect. The other original squad of Gaunts is moving up, running up this gully between the barricades and the rock, and the final Tervigon is also moving up. The Tyranids are very close to the Commodore and the Scions. Things are looking grim in the centre. Let's see what happens in Tyranids Assault Phase, turn 1. End of Tyranid Assault Phase, turn 1, and the Raveners have struck. They took no damage from the overwatch of the Scions or in the assault, and they easily tore the 6 remaining elite guardsmen to pieces, and it is not looking good for the Commodore. But they've only consolidated 1 inch, so they will now have to weather the Imperial Guard counter-attack. It looks like the hero of Hades' Hive is going to have to take control and drive the Tyranids from the field. They have scored first blood. They are in possession of the Relic. Let's see what Commissar Yarrick can do about it in Astra Militarum, turn 2. End of Astra Militarum movement phase, turn 2, and although the death of the Tempestus Scions was quite a shock, Commissar Yarrick has faced worse odds before, and the Guard have another plan. Yarrick has led 1 squad of the Armageddon Steel Legion Grenadiers from the rear of their Chimera that has climbed the rocky ridge behind the Crash Vendetta. They are going to combine their fire with the Scions Chimera, the Scions Command Squad's Chimera, and the plasma guns from these Scions embarked within it to try to eliminate the Raveners around the Imperial Navy officer. There are 5 plasma guns and a lot more shots besides. Will that be enough? We shall see, because the second part of the Imperial Guard plan is to take out this Tervigon. Imperial intelligence suggests that if you take out these big ugly creatures, then these little ones all suffer badly. So the Leman Russes are once again adjusting their sights to unleash a hail of fire, and the 2 remaining squads of Steel Legion Grenadiers, they have moved round 6 inches in their Chimeras, and they will add their fire to this Tervigon if necessary, or if the Tervigon goes down, they can start taking out the smaller bugs as well. So the Imperial Guard, they are unfazed. They have a new plan and they're going to execute it. Let's see, going into Astra Militarum, shooting phase, turn 2. End of Astra Militarum shooting phase, turn 2, and Commissar Yarrick looks on with grim satisfaction at a job well done. The Leman Russes opened fire and a hail of high caliber shells easily took out the Turvigon on the rocky rise, and as it collapsed, a wave of psychic backlash swept through all of these broods of gaunts. This brood lost 4, this brood lost another 5, this brood lost 4, and finally this brood lost another 4. That is a huge number of gaunts that were taken out. It is only because these gaunts are in synapse range of the other Turvigon that they have held, which is more than can be said for the Raveners. They took an absolute hail of fire from the Tempestus command squad with their plasma guns from the top hatch of their Chimera, a blast from this Chimera's heavy flamer, and a deadly accurate volley from Yarrick's veterans. They lost 3 of their number, and the last 2 were no longer in synapse range. They have broken, they are falling back, and the Commodore breathes a sigh of relief. That freed off the rest of the Armageddon Steel Legion Chimeras to pour some fire into the gaunts that were near him, taking out another 4. So the Imperial Guard are extremely happy with the way this turn has gone. They have smashed a huge hole in the Tyranid centre, and they now stand a much better chance of rescuing the Commodore. Not a good turn for the Tyranids, but the Tyranids do have some reinforcements in reserve. Let's see if they arrive going into Tyranids Turn 2. Start of Tyranids Turn 2, and the hive mind was disappointed that the hive crone is still flapping its way towards the battlefield. It has not yet arrived, but the Tyranids have been bolstered by the arrival of the Trigon Prime, which, sensing the heavy tread of the Leman Russ tanks, has, in a very risky deep strike, popped up just behind them, right in this corner of the table. He is going to unleash his bioelectric pulse into the rear of the tank commander's armour. The plan of the Tyranids looks like it is to deny the Imperial Guard their long-range fire base that has been so deadly so far, and they still have plenty of bugs in the centre. And good news, although the Raveners were still just out of synapse range even with Dominion, they have managed to rally. So let's see what the Tyranids do in Tyranids movement phase turn 2. End of Tyranids movement phase turn 2, and it looks like the hive mind is attempting to encircle the guardsmen, as well as a problem behind their Leman Russes, as the Trigon Prime has appeared. The Tempestus Sans command squad and the now empty Chimera have problems. These Raveners, they have moved up and they are looking to unleash their Devourers and charge this Chimera. Meanwhile, the Scion command have a big problem, as the Haruspex has smashed through these barricades and he is not going to fail his charge. From there, in the centre, this Turvigon, he is the warlord of this Tyranid force, and he has devised a plan. These 2 gaunts from this brood, they have grabbed hold of the Commodore, and the Turvigon is ordering all the remaining gaunts to move forward as quickly as possible to form a screen of expendable bodies between the senior officer and the rescuing guardsmen. The Raveners, they are doing the same thing. So it looks like the Tyranids are going to hit the guard hard on this flank and from behind, and they are going to try to make off with the officer as well. Let's see if they manage it. First we have Tyranids Psychic Phase turn 2. End of Tyranid Psychic Phase turn 2, and with 6 dice this Turvigon managed to successfully get Dominion off on himself. That is going to be critical, as there are not many synapse creatures in this Tyranid's force. He then used his last couple of dice to attempt to get Warp Blast off on Yarrick and his squad, but he was unsuccessful. Let's see what the Tyranids do in Tyranid shooting phase, turn 2. End of Tyranid shooting phase, turn 2, and a disappointing phase for the Tyranids. The newly arrived Trigon Prime, he managed to get lots of hits on the rear of the tank commander's armour, but he only got one that penetrated. At least the tank is shaken. And the Raveners, they are left confused, as despite getting a huge 15 hits on this Chimera, they didn't roll a single 6. It is unharmed by their devourers. The Haruspex missed with its tongue as it prepares to assault the Scion command squad. And meanwhile in the centre, the Tervigon and all the Gaunts have run forwards. They are trying to bog down the centre of the battlefield with bodies, while the rest of the Tyranids make off with the Imperial Navy officer. Let's see if the Tyranids can inflict significantly more damage than they did in the shooting phase, going into Tyranids assault phase, turn 2. End of Tyranids assault phase, turn 2, and the Raveners, they easily made it into this Chimera. They had plenty of attacks and they wrecked it with plenty of hull point damage to spare, and the Haruspex made it in to the Scion's command squad Chimera. It ploughed straight into the fuel tanks and the vehicle detonated, but the Tempestor Prime, he must have ordered his men to disembark as he saw the Haruspex approaching, as despite the explosion, none of his men were injured, and they are not pinned either. So the Tyranids have struck hard over on the Imperial Guard right flank, and they are still in possession of the Commodore. But the Imperial Guard, they have got plenty of reserves to commit. Yarrick and his Steel Legion, and the supporting fire of the Russes. So we really do not know which way this is going to go. Going into Astra Militarum, turn 3. End of Astra Militarum movement phase, turn 3, and Commissar Yarrick has a hunch. His soldier's mind tells him that this monstrous beast in the centre of the swarm is directing all the rest of these creatures, and Yarrick has decided that it's time for this beast to go down, and the entirety of the 301st Mechanised Grenadiers have deployed on their Commissar's orders as he leads one squad across his central rocky rise. Another squad has deployed from their Chimera and taken up position in the wreckage of the Vendetta, and the third and final squad, they have moved up to the far rocky rise. There are 9 plasma guns here. With Yarrick's orders, will that be enough to take out this Tervigon? If so, a lot of these Gaunts could die. Will that clear the path to rescue the Commodore? We shall see. Meanwhile, the Scion command squad, they have 3 plasma guns as well. They know that their flank is overrun, but they are going to combine their fire with the fire of the Lehman Russes to try to take out these Raveners. They are deadly and they need to go. The Chimeras, 3 remaining Armageddon Chimeras, they will add their firepower where it is most needed. If the Guard have a good phase here, it could be devastating. Let's see. Astra Militarum shooting phase, turn 3. End of Astra Militarum shooting phase, turn 3, and the hammer of the Emperor has fallen upon this Tyranid swarm. Following Yarrick's orders, his own squad of veterans opened fire with their plasma guns, and they were joined in their fire by the squad in the cover of the Vendetta and the 3 Armageddon Chimeras, and the central Tervigon was blown apart. And that is also Slay the Warlord, but crucially, the synaptic backlash from his demise took out 14 Gaunts from the many broods in the centre, and there are only 5 left. They are fleeing. The Tyranids, they appear to have suffered a fatal blow. And more bad news. The Scions, they blew apart one Ravener with their plasma guns, although they did lose a Scion as his weapon overheated. And the Lehman Russes, they blew apart another. And with no synapse control anywhere near here, the remaining 4 Raveners, they are also falling back. The Commodore cannot believe it, as streams of Tyranid creatures that were surrounding him seem to have lost all stomach for this fight. They are fleeing. The 2 Raveners that were blocking this canyon, they are gone as well. One of them was blown apart by the final squad of the Mechanised Grenadiers, and the last Ravener, he has fled the battle. So this has been an excellent turn for the Guard. The Tyranids are reeling. We do not know how they can come back into this game now. The Haruspex, he is not fleeing, but he is out of Synapse range. These three units there are all fleeing, and the only Synapse creature left is the Trigon Prime. It is beginning to look like a big mistake to have brought him on so far away from the main body of the swarm. Let's see, what can the Tyranids do? Going into Tyranids turn 3. Start of Tyranids turn 3, and just when the Commodore believes he might be saved by the valiant actions of Commissar Yarrick, he looks up in horror to see a hideous form swooping over him. The Hive Crone has arrived. Will it help the Tyranids? Let's see. Tyranids movement phase turn 3. End of Tyranids movement phase turn 3, and it looks like the small bugs have lost all appetite for this fight. None of the Gaunts have rallied. They are heading for the hills, and so are the Raveners. They're slithering through this gully, but they're just trying to make their escape. It is only the Tyranid big bugs that are continuing to exercise the will of the hive mind. The Haruspex passed its instinctive behaviour check, and it is eyeing up a tasty morsel in the form of Commissar Yarrick. The newly arrived Hive Crone is preparing its dual cannon, and the Trigon Prime is going to at least satisfy itself by tearing through a squadron of Leman Russ battle tanks. But we have got the feeling this is far too little and far too late. Let's see, going into Tyranid shooting phase turn 3. The Tyranids have lost all their psychers as well. Let's see what they can do. End of Tyranid shooting phase turn 3, and the Trigon Prime unleashed its bioelectric pulse again. Managed to get another penetrating hit on the tank commander, and he has shaken him again in preparation for his charge. The Haruspex missed with its grasping tongue, but the Hive Crone unleashed its dual cannon all over Yarrick and his veterans. 3 of the veteran guardsmen threw themselves into the path of the stream of bile to protect their beloved Commissar, and they all went down. But under the stern gaze of Yarrick, the Armageddon Steel Legion would not think of retreating. And finally, the fleeing Raveners. They unleashed some snapshots from their devourers, but not a single guardsman from this veteran squad fell. So a quiet phase from the Tyranids, unsurprisingly. Let's see if they can swing this battle back. Going into Tyranids assault phase, turn 3. End of Tyranid assault phase, turn 3, and the Haruspex made it into Yarrick and his veterans. His Hammer of Wrath crushed a veteran, and he consumed 3 more. Meanwhile, the remaining veterans could not harm him with their bayonets, but Yarrick swung his power claw and managed to inflict 2 wounds on the beast. So Yarrick lost the combat, but he is not the kind of guy that runs away from a fight. The other combat was quite successful for the Tyranids. The Trigon Prime made it in. His Hammer of Wrath took out the tank commander's last hull point, and his attack spilled over. He has managed to do 2 penetrating hits on the other Leman Russ Exterminator. It is immobilised. It's lost one of its heavy bolters, but crucially it can still fire. So the Tyranids are doing the best they can with what they have left, but it's not a lot. Let's see how the guardsmen respond in Astra Militarum turn 4. End of Astra Militarum movement phase turn 4, and it looks like the Hive Crone is the target for pretty much the entire Imperial Guard relief force. These veterans, they are advancing on the Commodore's position and training their weapons at the Flying Tyranid Beast, as are the other squad of veterans. All the Chimeras are also training their multi-laser turrets on this beast, and the Scion command squad is advancing to get their plasma guns into rapid fire range as well. Yarrick, he and his few remaining veterans from this squad remain locked against the Haruspex. The guardsmen are praying that the hero of Armageddon can just tie up this beast. Meanwhile, knowing that he is not going to survive for very long, the last Leman Russ It's immobilised, it's lost one of its heavy bolters, but it can still fire, and it too thinks its fire may be needed against the hive crone. If the hive crone goes down, anything left can of course keep shepherding these smaller bugs off the battlefield with more fire. We shall see. The guardsmen are closing in on the Imperial Navy officer. Let's see how they do in their fourth shooting phase. End of Astra Militarum shooting phase, turn 4, and it has been a disappointing phase for the guardsmen. Every unengaged Imperial Guard unit opened fire on the hive crone and inflicted a huge amount of wounds, but between its armour and jinking it was only wounded twice, and it has managed to remain airborne as well. So that was a lot of firepower to only cause 2 wounds, but it's not easy shooting down, jinking, flying monstrous creatures. We have an ongoing assault. Let's see whether Yarrick can triumph over the hideous Haruspecs. Astra Militarum, assault phase, turn 4. End of Astra Militarum, assault phase, turn 4, and the fight between the Haruspecs and Commissar Yarrick continues. The Haruspecs has consumed another 2 Armageddon Steel Legion veterans, and as a consequence has recovered another wound. In return, Yarrick has once again swung his power claw and wounded the beast again. They remain locked. It looks like the Haruspecs is gradually munching his way through the guardsmen to get to the Commissar himself. Let's see what the Tyranids can do. Maybe if some of these units rally and move back towards the Commodore, the Tyranids can still snatch this. Let's see, going into Tyranids, turn 4. End of Tyranids movement phase, turn 4, and the hive crone attempted to vector strike the last Leman Russ, allowing the Trigon Prime to move towards the centre. Unfortunately, his vector strike was unsuccessful. The tank was not damaged. It is still there. It's immobilised. It's lost heavy bolter. It's got 1 hull point left. But will the Trigon Prime finish it off, or is he needed in the centre? We shall see. The Haruspecs is locked in combat, and one piece of good news for the Tyranids is, as the last few gaunts flee the battle, the Raveners have rallied, but they can only move 3 inches, fire snapshots, they can't assault. Will they be able to make a difference? Let's see, going into Tyranids shooting phase, turn 4. End of Tyranid shooting phase, turn 4, and the hive crone attempted a snapshot with the tentaclid to finish off the Leman Russ, but missed. The Trigon Prime has not fired. He needs to close the distance to the middle of the battlefield where the Imperial Navy officer is. He is either going to charge this Chimera or Yarrick. We shall see. It's a long charge if he wants to charge the redoubtable Commissar. Obviously the Haruspecs is still locked in combat. Maybe he is enough to take Yarrick out. And the snap shooting Raveners may manage to take out 1 guardsman with their Devourers, but these are the Steel Legion veterans. They are not going anywhere. Let's see what the Trigon Prime does in Tyranids assault phase, turn 4. End of Tyranids assault phase, turn 4, and the Trigon Prime decided it was just too far to try to get into Yarrick. It would have been an 11-inch charge because he had to go up the rock face. Even with fleet, he probably wouldn't have made it. So he charged into the Chimera, but he only managed to do 2 hull points and shake the vehicle. It is not destroyed. Meanwhile, the Haruspecs consumed the Armageddon Steel Legion Sergeant, but that was all it could do. Yarrick swung his power claw twice, reducing the Haruspecs to 2 wounds, but he did of course get a wound back for eating another guardsman. So they remain locked. It looks like neither of these 2 are going to be going anywhere for a while. Let's see how the Guard respond in Astra Militarum, turn 5. End of Astra Militarum movement phase, turn 5, and the Guardsmen are focusing on their objective of rescuing the Commodore. 1 squad of Steel Legion veterans, they have moved through cover and they have surrounded the officer. They are his rescuers, and they are preparing to give fire against the newly rallied Raveners. With a terrible move through cover roll, this other squad of veterans, they are going to have to content themselves with unleashing as much firepower on the Raveners as they can. And the Tempestus Scion command squad, they're moving around the back of the Haruspex, which is still occupied with Yarrick. They are also planning to fire on the Raveners. They need to drive them off. If they can do that, hopefully the Commodore will be safe. Meanwhile, the rest of the Guard army, which is all armoured units, they are all ordered to focus their firepower on the Trigon Prime. So all three Chimeras are focusing their multi-lasers and their heavy bolters upon the monster, and the last Leman-Russ Exterminator is doing the same. Will it be enough? If the Trigon Prime goes down and the Raveners, surely that will be enough to give the Guard victory. Let's see. Astra Militarum, shooting phase, turn 5. End of Astra Militarum shooting phase, turn 5, and the Armageddon Steel Legion have finally dealt with the Raveners. The fire of both of these squads and the Tempestor Scion command squad managed to gun down 2 of the Raveners, and the remaining 2 have finally fled the battlefield. Meanwhile, the 3 Chimeras, they open fire on the Trigon Prime. They managed to do a single wound despite getting lots and lots of hits, and 2 more wounds were done by some accurate fire from the badly damaged Leman-Russ Exterminator. So these big bugs are proving very resilient. Surely the Guardsmen have done enough. Let's see. We have the epic combat between Commissar Yarrick and the Haruspex. Astra Militarum assault phase, turn 5. End of Astra Militarum assault phase, turn 5, and Commissar Yarrick is proving what a hero of the Imperium he is. The Haruspex only managed to get 1 wounding hit, and it was saved by the Commissar's power field. In return, he swung his power claw. He got 3 hits, only 2 wounds. So the Haruspex was almost killed, but he remains alive on 1 wound. Looks like Yarrick is having the best of this fight, but unfortunately, the Trigon Prime is here. Let's see what the Tyranids do with their very few remaining creatures in Tyranids Turn 5. End of Tyranids movement phase, turn 5, and with only 2 creatures available to move, it was a short phase. The Hive Crone has passed its instinctive behaviour check. It's dropped down into hover mode, and it intends to take out this Leman-Russ. There's not much it can do. The Trigon, he is going to try to smash through the middle of the line to get at the officer, hopefully crushing Yarrick along the way. That is a brief phase. Let's see if the Hive Crone can finish off this Leman-Russ in Tyranid shooting phase, turn 5. End of Tyranid shooting phase, turn 5, and although its dual cannon had no effect on the rear armour of the Leman-Russ Exterminator, the Hive Crone has finally managed to take it out with a tentaclid that caused a haywire glancing hit. So, quite successful in the one thing that they wanted to achieve in this phase. Let's see if the Trigon Prime can make it into Commissar Yarrick in Tyranid's assault phase, turn 5. End of Tyranid assault phase, turn 5, and the Trigon Prime ploughed into the back of Commissar Yarrick, and with a contemptuous flick of its claws sent his seemingly dead body skittering away across the rocks. Both the Trigon Prime and the Haruspex have consolidated a couple of inches, but they are hemmed in by guardsmen. They are struggling to get closer to the Imperial Navy officer that is the objective. That is the end of Tyranids turn 5. Will the game be going into turn 6? Let's see. And the men of the Armageddon Steel Legion look on in dismay as the towering form of the Trigon Prime roars in triumph from the top of the rocky outcrop. They have sworn vengeance for their Commissar, but just as they have given up hope, they see the form of a Commissar's hat come into view behind the Trigon as Yarrick drags himself to his feet once again. He has rolled a 4, he's back. That roll is never failed by Commissar Yarrick, it seems, and the guardsmen are jubilant. Not only that, they are planning to wreak a terrible revenge on the Trygon Prime and the Haruspex. There are a lot of plasma guns pointed at these two monstrous creatures, and the Haruspex only has a wound left. The Trygon's only got 3 wounds left. The Guardsmen are going to relish this. Going into Astra Militarum, movement phase, turn 6. End of Astra Militarum, movement phase, turn 6, and the Armageddon Steel Legion Mechanised Grenadiers, they are advancing upon the Tyranid beasts. They are warming up their plasma guns. Meanwhile, one of their Chimeras has moved on top of this rocky rise to get a line of sight to the monstrous creatures and to make sure it can get a point 4 line breaker, and the other 2 Chimeras, they have stayed stationary. They are also ready to unleash their weaponry. If the Guardsmen can shoot these 2 monsters down, maybe their multi-lasers can deal with the Hive Crone. The Commodore is safe with 1 squad of veterans, and the Scions, seeing that, they are turning their plasma guns on these monsters as well. Yarrick, he has stayed where he is. He is preparing to issue orders. He's just within 12 inches of his Steel Legion veterans. Going into Astra Militarum shooting phase, turn 6. End of Astra Militarum shooting phase, turn 6, and it took 3 words from Commissar Yarrick to take down the monstrous threat in the centre. Bring it down, and the Armageddon Steel Legion veterans took great joy in doing exactly that. They opened fire with a wave of plasma, and both the Trygon Prime and the Haruspex were blown to pieces as the Commodore looks on with some satisfaction. That freed off the Armageddon Steel Legion Chimeras to swivel their multi-laser turrets round to see the Hive Crone, which had dropped out of flying mode, so it was a sitting duck, and with a very accurate volley of laser fire, the Chimeras sent it crashing to the ground. That was the last Tyranid organism on the battlefield. The Guard have achieved a notable victory. Yarrick has been epic, so have the Steel Legion, and the Commodore is saved. The final score is 1 point to the Tyranids. They did manage to get first blood. The Guardsmen, they got Slay the Warlord when they took out the Central Turbigon. They have got Linebreaker thanks to one of their Chimeras, and of course they have recovered the vital Imperial officer, giving them 5 points. The final score is 5 points to the Guardsmen. Only 1 point to the Tyranids, and it's a tabling. The Guard have been epic in this game, especially Commissar Yarrick and his Steel Legion Mechanised Grenadiers. This has been an epic game. We have enjoyed playing it immensely. Thanks very much for watching. Please subscribe to our channel, and we will keep producing as many Warhammer 40,000 battle reports as we can. See ya.